Historical. Hope Springs set out to the communities of Potuki, Jesu, Shela, and Dongol. With each location, community leaders and elders referred to this event as historical. They would say, "This is history in the making. No one ever comes here." These places are similar to what we would call suburbs of Gombe City, which is the capital of the state of Gombe, Nigeria. This state is approximately 70% Muslim and 30% Christian. The birthplace of Islamic extremist group Boko Haram was just a few hours east of us. These people are no strangers to loss, trauma, grief. Some are widows. Some have lost contact with family. Some are clueless as to where they even come from. All of the villages we served in had adults and children who had never seen a white person in their entire lives. Imagine being born on the street you live on today. Not the same town, the same street. That's how small some of these communities are, separated from others for miles and miles. You spend your childhood playing with friends and trying to survive on that same street. Maybe you're able to go to a local school because you have a sponsor that supports you. You know what college is, but are fairly certain you won't be able to go. You don't know what it's like to dream about your career as an adult. Meanwhile, you have never left your street. You have never gone on vacation. You may not even know your family at all. You might eat one meal a day, usually rice of some kind. You might have access to a hand pump well that delivers clean water, but more than likely you have been fetching water from dirty creeks since you were a small child. Family members and friends dying of diseases and wounds that could easily be taken care of if you had access or the means. The means. There never seems to be quite enough means. This mission started out as just a dental services-based project, but it grew into so much more. The goals were to provide dental and medical services to underserved communities, education on health-related issues, ophthalmology care through eye exams and related treatment, provide medication and grain in bulk to members of the community. But something much deeper would happen when we showed up to these places. The people felt seen. They were heard. These Nigerians were looking at people who came from the other side of the world and took it upon themselves to leave their luxuries and their comforts, and they chose to go to Gombe State, Nigeria, and serve them. In the name of Christ, we chose to go and be witness to these people and bless them. To be seen and heard cannot be monetarily priced. There is no currency exchanged for the love for your fellow man. To feel like you matter enough that a group of Westerners can come bringing aid to you, your family, your friends. These things cannot be itemized on a spreadsheet. Matthew 25 says, "When the Son of Man finally arrives, blazing in beauty and all his angels with him, he will take his place on his glorious throne. Then all the nations will be arranged before him. Then the King will say to those on his right, 'Enter, you who are blessed by my Father. Take what's coming to you in this kingdom. It's been ready for you since the world's foundation. And here's why. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was homeless and you gave me a room. I was shivering and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you stopped to visit. I was in prison and you came to me. Then those people will say, Master, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry and feed you, thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we ever see you sick or in prison and come to you? Then the king will say, I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to someone who is overlooked or ignored, that was me. It was just like you did it to me.
Seven weeks ago, this group of people, plus 3 or 4 more that couldn't be with us today, traveled 6,230 miles to visit 4 villages, an orphan home where the orphans there were victims of Islamic extremists, to provide 3 clean water wells, to distribute what would end up being over 16 tons of grain to 4,847 people. Some came from across the street. Some came from 12, 15, 20 miles. Some walked on their own. Some had to be carried there. Because of your generosity, we not only had the team of 4 to 5 Nigerian doctors and dentists we thought we would have, but we were able to provide, and we had to fund them to be there with us, but we were able to fund 23 Nigerian doctors and dentists to come along who would follow us up on our trip there. What I hope today does is to show you what an incredible difference you made in the world. On the stage with me are 9 incredible people who brought hope to this largely forgotten part of the world. It was a long way from Nashville, Tennessee. We began with an 8-hour flight to London, a 10-hour layover in London, then a 6-hour flight to Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria, and then a 6 to 7-hour trip over some very dirt roads. There's a video going to play around me when I talk. You can kind of see the different roads we had. It was not uncommon to see loads of people in trucks. If you could find just a truck to ride on and you were going somewhere because transportation was scarce, you would just jump on it to get to wherever you were going. And we would have city roads like that. And then I think you saw some dirt roads in there that had gullies that were 1 to 2 feet where you were navigating your way around those. We had some pretty good accommodations, especially compared to the trip 5 years ago. We actually had indoor bathrooms that were good while we were at the hotel that we stayed. Think Super 8 that needed some repair. That was kind of where we are. There were exposed wiring on everything that worked. I think we had John and Zeta's room. I think we figured out after they blew everything, we figured out that their electricity was wired for 440 instead of the 220. So they blew up a few things, and it's a wonder we didn't have a fire. But anyway, it was good accommodations from there. When we get out in the field, not so much there. They might have a place to go to the bathroom. Sometimes it was where people could see. Sometimes it wasn't where people could see. But anyways, the entire complex we were at was run by a generator, if that tells you anything. And from there, we would load up in vans each morning, and we would travel from the city that you saw at the end to some of the most remote places that I have ever in my life been a part of going. We would travel a minimum of an hour and a half out. Some of the villages that we would go to would be 3.5 hours out till you would get to a cornfield, and then you would travel another mile or so into this cornfield. Most of the people came from houses that look like the one on the screen right now. And to live in a house of mud, what you will see is, one of the things I thought of is they have some clean clothes for people who live in a house of mud. But anyway, I think the biggest challenge before we got there that I was asked about was security. As John mentioned in the video, we were just a couple of hours from where Boko Haram really got its origins and kind of operated out of. They have kind of been forced back north a little bit of there. But John, tell us, since security was big on everybody's mind, tell us about security.
For the Nigerians, because they know if something happens to us, we might not be back. So we had anywhere from 12 to 15 either local police and kind of the equivalent of maybe like the National Guard, and even some special forces operatives, the Nigerian version of that
Well, I don't know if you can see the picture up there. You look a little bit more tough than they do right there. In that.
This picture is a joke. Just so you know, this is a joke.
But, went from there. Daniel there that stayed with us everywhere. He would do a pre-op thing. He would go into the village. If we were going into a house, he would go first, and his little team of 4 people, they were like special forces, make sure everything was okay. Then we would get out and unload. And then the last village we were at, we had to leave our things overnight. And Stephanie and Tori had thousands of dollars of dental equipment, and we were wondering if it would be there the next morning. So Lee goes out and he hires the local militia, and here they are with their Civil War guns who came to protect our stuff. And their request was, could we see their family the next day? And that was what we did. So, hey, that was kind of, I don't know, I really didn't feel unsafe any of the time where they were there, whether that's just being naive or I don't know, but I never felt unsafe. And I don't think many of us did either. When we got there, what would happen, if I give you kind of a typical day, there would be 2 areas. There would be a tent that was already set up that we would triage in. When we would get there, our goal was to be there by 8 o'clock each morning. So you can tell what time we're having to leave when they're an hour and a half to 3.5 hours away to get there. When we arrived at every village, there were always, I would say, a minimum of 350 to 400 people, sometimes upwards of 1,000 people already waiting, I would say in line, but that's not the case. Lines were hard to come by. But that was kind of what it was. So you had the outside area, and then you found places where we were trying to put our medical, pharmacy, and doctor team. Most of them would be in abandoned, a building that largely had nothing going on in it. It might be used as a school, but so that's where they would be. And some of us who were non-medical personnel, we would try to get people from this tent in an orderly way to the doctors and the nurses on the inside. With that being said, we got John up there. Mac, tell us a little bit about how we set up that initial triage area there at the front.
Yeah, so when we showed up, like he said, there was already hundreds of people waiting. We've got a couple pictures just to kind of give you an idea of, these were the people that were walking out of the cornfields at us. And when we showed up, they just kept coming. And so when we got there, there was already a tent set up. It helped with heat and just kind of keeping people in certain areas. They'd go from a waiting tent like this to a triage tent where they would meet with a medical person of some kind, a nurse, EMT. Doug was one of those. They would get to sit at a table. The first day they were desks from the school. After that, I think we were taking people's dining room tables, their end tables, whatever we could find. And we've got another picture to show what it normally looked like at triage. So you'd have your medical person like Doug on one side, and then on the lower left you would have an interpreter. The first stop was a school, so it was a lot of school teachers. After that, it was anybody that spoke both languages. They were used as interpreters for the time that they were there. And then across from them is the patient. At this point, it was women and children were in some lines, and then men in other lines. As you can see, the kids were not quite as excited as the adults to see us. Most of these children have never seen a white person before in their life. They were terrified of us. Most of them ran away. So this was one of the better reactions that we got. So after they were triaged, they'd head to the next area, whether that was ophthalmology, dental, or medical.
And Doug, so you kind of, and tell a little bit, just tell what you kind of do in your life here, and then kind of what your job was there, but talk us through what impacted you the most on this trip.
So here stateside, I'm a firefighter with Nashville and also a cattle farmer. Over there, it was triage, and as Mackenzie alluded to, basically we were trying to figure out what these people needed the most, whether that be medical care, ophthalmology, or dental care. But we would take vitals, heart rate, blood pressure, and things, and oftentimes we would have to get out there and see what their biggest issues were, and we would see issues that you don't see here. You don't see in the United States. And several times we would have to bandage wounds that people had that they had had these wounds for years and had been open to bacteria and disease. And so we were finally able to get to them and help them.
I saw under the tent there would be 3 to 4 people set up, and Doug kind of took the lead on those, getting the people there. And, from that point, after your team of nurses and the medical personnel would see them, then my part of the crowd control, which I use those words loosely. There was not a lot of control. It was kind of getting the crowd from one place to another. It was getting them to Mackenzie, who was at the medical line, Danny, who was at the dental line, and the pharmacist line, which is all over the place. But we would try to get them to those different places. And so when we got them there, they would meet people like Stephanie and Tori. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about how you set up. That's kind of the outside. Walk us through what the inside was like.
I think we have some photos of this too. We had, in the dental part, we would then have to triage what they've already triaged. They would just identify someone with a dental need, and then they would come to us, and we would have to identify what sort of dental need they had. This is a picture of our setup of all the different supplies and tools and instruments that we brought. And then outside of that, we had to commandeer, like Mackenzie said, any kind of little side table that we could use to kind of set up what we would here call an operatory to work out of. And you can kind of see that there. All of our equipment, I mean, outside of pulling teeth, really to do anything else, you need electricity. And we were pretty dependent on generators. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. Most times they did, thank goodness. But luckily we were able to get the job done.
It was 2 or 3 times they would come back with gas for the generator, and it's like there are no OSHA approved anything where we are. It is a glass bottle that I don't know where they found it, but there we got Coke bottles, and they are pouring gasoline into the generator there. Tori, tell us what you kind of do in real life. And that's kind of what I did next. I just said, y'all pick something that impacted you the most and tell our church family about it. And we'll start here with Tori. Tell us who you are and then what you did in Nigeria.
I am a dentist with Stephanie, and in Nigeria I was also a dentist. And it was awesome. You say that lightly. It was great to be there. It's not awesome to see all of that, but I think we were just felt blessed to be able to be there in the right moments, and this was exactly one of those opportunities that we had. There was a woman that we saw in the field, and she had a really bad infection. It's something in a dental term called osteomyelitis, and basically the infection is so big and so severe that it has to go somewhere outside of the body, and so it chose to go outside of her cheek. And she's in a lot of pain. It's not ideal in the U.S. Obviously, we'd want to see her in a hospital, maybe get some IVs on her, take care of the infection, and then take care of the issue. You don't have that luxury out there. It's kind of a death sentence if you don't do anything, because she can get skin cancer or bone cancer. So you have to do something or else she doesn't have a life. And so thank goodness we had an oral surgeon out there that was from Nigeria that took the time out of his life to come to this remote area with us. And he was like, it's not ideal, but we will get it done. And we got her as comfortable as possible and took the tooth out, which ideally would help the infection. We also had that pharmacy out there, which was great. So we had antibiotics to give her to help heal her and virtually kind of save her life. And it's just another reason why we were put in that village on that day, in that place, to be able to save her life.
And again, for people like her, the funds that you provided to buy extra antibiotics came in situations like that, and the wound care that Doug is talking about doing in the field. They are doing things in the field that I would have taken myself or my children to an emergency room or to a hospital for. That in his bag of tricks that he brought with them is just caring for people out there in the middle of the dust. Stephanie, what impacted you the most on the trip?
It's hard to pick one thing. You know, I think when we talked about one of the things that struck me from the beginning was, you know, the fact that we are in a remote part of the world where people still live in villages and have kind of a tribal mentality, whereas here we are usually tempted to treat children first. You know, we want to take care of the little kids, and there, you know, it was children last, and usually men, especially the elders of their village first. And so that struck me as a difference between here and there. But we did get to see plenty of kids, thankfully. And one of the children, I think we have a photo of him, is also something that you don't see too often here, but we saw this little guy, and in the dental world we would say this is a retrognathic jaw. That just means it is not growing properly. The joints in his mandible are not growing, and so his jaw, as you can see on the bottom, is roughly the same size it was probably when he was an infant. And we asked him to show us how wide you can open really wide, and that's what he gave me. It kind of looked like he's jutting his jaw forward, but that was his maximum opening. So you can imagine how hard it is for him to speak or to chew. There's no way we could do any dental work on him. So like Tori told me, or told you, there was an oral surgeon from Nigeria that joined us, and I got with him, and we were talking about what kind of surgery he could have to correct that. And he said, yeah, we could do something like that, not at his age, but maybe when he's older. But there's no way his family could afford that. So unless you can offer some sort of support, there's really not a lot we can do for him. And so I asked him, well, what does that kind of a surgery cost here? Or what would you be able to do that for? And he gave me a large number in their local currency. And after we did the conversion, it ended up being $150 US. And I was like, I have that in my backpack. I can go grab it for you now. And can we please get this little guy seen? And so we exchanged information, and hopefully they're going to be able to do something for him. But that was a striking moment for me to realize the disparity between cost of what things are here versus there. That kind of surgery here would be thousands of dollars. You need a hospital, or all the stuff that goes with that. And so that was a striking moment.
And one of the things that people will come out smiling from where you were and showing, we got a before and after of a guy you
Yeah, we did
on.
a lot of cleanings. We did a lot of dental cleanings. Most people there had never seen, let alone a dentist, a toothbrush. And so we did some deep scaling and root planing, we call it in our dental terms. And this guy, this is what he looked like before, and then we have a photo of what his teeth looked like afterwards. And he was so excited to see his teeth like that. And so that's always an instant gratification type of scenario. So.
And he came out smiling, showing everybody his new set of teeth. And then I don't know if you saw in the video, and we'll post this later on, John to NorthField, and where anybody could share it if they want to see what we did. You'll see in there a Nigerian, one of the people that came, she's got a big set of teeth. She is doing that because they have never been taught how to brush their teeth and toothbrushes. Stephanie and Tori brought with them well over 1,000 toothbrushes. We gave them all out, and then they modeled to the kids and the adults. And it was funny watching 800, even adults, sitting there when you're showing them how to wash their teeth. And they were as quiet, like, and watching that. Doug, you had, on the outside, we just saw a lot of poverty on the outside where we were. Talk to us about what impacted you the most.
I think, as you mentioned, the poverty level is what we saw. And as I came back and tried to recap and tell people about the trip, I just could not describe in words. But every time I sat down to recap, two words came to mind, and that was hope and joy. All the massiveness of poverty and the corruption we saw, the unease, as John mentioned, the security that we had to have. We had one guard that wouldn't let us leave the site until he knew we were complete. So Nas will be complete one of these days. All of those things impacted us. All of those things that we saw, everybody had hope. Everybody had hope. As we gathered for our days, we'd bring snacks. We often wouldn't eat them just from the fact of we saw these children and these adults that had no food. They were emaciated, they were malnourished. But I had two of our interpreters one day in one of the villages. They came out, and they had been brought food that they were being served. These guys ate maybe a third to a fourth of what they had, and then they sat their plate down with the children. And 10, 15, 20 children gathered around each of the couple plates and just devoured what was left, eating the morsels of food that had fallen onto the ground. It was just something that they had a chance. And then the lines and the crowds, and I think we've got a couple pictures and even a video. One of these days that we were out there, the crowds became so overwhelming that we had to pull our triage unit back into one of the buildings just until we can get some semblance of security and peace. And my interpreter, Pascal, jumped in, and he gave us that hope. A young man who had just graduated graduated college with an engineering degree, jumped in and controlled this crowd of several hundred people to allow us to come back out and serve these people. And in the midst of all of this, everything just kept recurring, is hope and joy. People coming from the fields, bearing their tools that they were using to farm with, same tools that we would imagine that we would use in biblical times. No wonder they had back pain from many years of using, hand hoes and everything like this. But in all of that, it was hope and joy. Even a child came forward as we were playing with him at the end of the day. He had an umbilical hernia that was the size of a miniature football, and had fun. He was having fun, and all of a sudden we had 4 young boys coming forward with those hernias, and all throughout it, just levels of humility, levels of joy, and levels of hope that we hope to attain.
I know, I think all of us expressed the same sentiment at one point, because people have asked, did you enjoy the trip? And it is very difficult to say yes, because it was such poverty. So you were blessed that you were there, but it was hard to say something that you enjoyed, because when I think of enjoy, I think of I went to a movie, I went to something. So enjoy, if you interpret that word to be, were you able to make a difference, perhaps bigger than most differences that you're able to make here? The answer would be yes. Enjoy as in, did I go to anywhere that would have been like a vacation? Not enjoy in that sense. It's this strange dichotomy, isn't it, of words? And I think, John, you have kind of expressed that. Tell us the things that impacted you.
The contrast of emotions that you're fighting second by second can come and go, and it's really hard to manage. In one instance where we had a bit of a chaotic security-based moment the day before, so I tried to insert myself a little closer to some of these trucks that we were giving food away at the end of these days, because we knew we weren't going to be able to see everyone. So it was almost like a consolation prize at the end. Well, you didn't get to see a doctor today, but we will try to give you a bag of food. We ran out of food every single day, and we're talking, 16 tons of food that we were handing out. And one of these situations where I was closer to the truck just to make sure we didn't have another incident like we had the day before. And I have the camera kind of on my chest. I'm getting shoved into this truck over and over again. At one point, I had to turn around, and I haven't had to put my hands on anybody in a long time in this manner, but I remember putting my hands on these 2 guys' chest and just having to shove them back forcefully. And they just stared at me, turned around again, and it all started again. And one of our guards, his name was Ali, he was in the truck. There was 1 bag of food left, and I'm still unsure of why he chose to handle it this way, but he looked at me on the ground and said, "You're going to decide who gets the last bag of food." And I remember just staring at him. I was like, okay, I'm on the ground here, and you're up there in this truck. And he put this bag in my hands, and immediately I think I caught an elbow to the side of my neck. I'm getting shoved again, all kinds of hands pushing and shoving. And I remember having these very violent, reactive emotions in my head to say, I need to get these people off of me. And then I'm starting to, remove them as best as I can. And then I just found this one woman. I found her right in front of me as I walked maybe 5 or 6 feet. And she's just staring up at me like she's never gotten anything from anybody ever. And I put this bag in her hands. And at this point, an older gentleman, when Stephanie was talking about the hierarchy of who gets served, this man was probably in his mid-60s. He started following me around and asking me why I didn't give him the bag of food. And I was fairly upset because this man was still, badgering me about this bag of food. And maybe in a not so polite way, I said that where I'm from, women and children eat first. And he just couldn't understand that concept. And he started laughing, and one of the other leaders was kind of interpreting. And I remember feeling really upset, really angry, but also the conflict of, what if I was in this position? And, I have 3 kids and a wife. I would be getting a bag of food, most definitely. And I probably would be willing to do anything, unreasonable or reasonable, to anyone to make sure that my family got food. So it was it was a tough time juggling those emotions. And it's something that we had to do the whole trip.
I know if you go back to that picture, if you'll put it back up on the screen, 1 minute there, that was the reality every single day, whether you were in the line at medical, dental, or pharmacy, and you're out of time and you have to get back because they wanted us back before dark, is looking at these people and not being able to offer them something in that moment and knowing that you're walking away. And which hand do you choose? And if you could hear the sights and the sounds, it's just a crazy trip. I know, John, you mentioned, I think the next slide after this is we came to dig water. You know, Hope Springs is known for water. I don't know whether you know that, but as NorthField Church has existed, you guys have given enough funds, and through Hope Springs, now over 500,000 people in this part of the world have water because of that coffee shop and because that you so freely give things. And one of the trucks there, you can see our well drilling machine. They've hit a little bit of water there. They're happy. You can see John in the picture on the other side. But it was a criteria to be able to send these Nigerian doctors and pharmacists back. You had to have clean water in the village. And so, again, we took the money you gave on what I'm calling Super Giving Sunday that you guys did. And every one of these villages that we went to now have an operating well in those villages because of you. Because without water, you can't clean wounds. Without clean water, really, the doctors would say, we can go back to that village, but 60% of the people are perpetually sick and dying because of not having safe drinking water. So you did something that lasted not only this trip, but the entire trip. Going back to the guards and the food was big. Mackenzie, there was probably our closest incident of seeing somebody crushed in a mob might have been you. Walk us through that.
Yes, so I was the security incident that John is referring to. So the day before what he was talking about, we were at a place called Jesu. We had finished up our day, and I was hanging out with some of the kids, which was kind of a rare, little joyful moment. I think we even have a video of us playing music and playing with the kids as we wrapped up that day. And so here we are, and one of our counterparts, Nigerian counterparts, had come up and said, hey, we need you to help pass out food. No problem. Finished what I was doing and walked up to the first of 2 trucks. The first truck was meant to serve the women, and I had an armed guard with me, so had no worries whatsoever, did not feel unsafe. But as soon as we started handing out food, those lines collapsed very quickly. 2 women reached for the same bag, and when they collided, I ended up getting hit in the process. I tucked my head and just kind of gave it a minute, and when I looked back up, the men had realized if they left their line and came back to our truck, they could freely grab those bags of food. When the women saw the men grabbing the food, they started to grab the food, and from there it fell apart. You can see our guard, it's hard to see him, but he's got his helmet on, coming to try to get in between those people and myself. I put my back to the truck, and I held onto his vest and just waited it out. The chaos around us, you could hear it, you could feel it. The truck's moving, he's moving, but there was a sense of peace. The only way I can describe it is God coming in and saying, you'll never understand this desperation, but I want you to get as close as possible. And this is as close as you can get. It dissipated. I was not allowed to pass out corn anymore. But it was scary, but it was needed.
I don't know if you saw in the picture there, maybe put it back up one more time. Notice the grain that is loose in the side of the truck that would fall out of some of the bags. When the truck would empty and they could see it was driving away, the women would hang on to the side of the truck. They would pull off an article of clothing or their thing, and they would try to scoop into their scarves just enough to take home, to be able to do something with for one day. If they didn't get a bag, if I can just get a handful, is the level really of desperation we're talking about from seeing this happen. Danny, incredible student pastor on our team here. I loved watching you with the kids. Kind of walk us through some things that you did.
Yeah, so I was all over the place. They had me hanging out with the kids, being in lines. I think I did triage for like an hour or 2 and messed up the blood pressure like 1,000 times. I don't know how to do it. I don't have any medical experience, so I probably wrote it all wrong. But the main kind of focus that I had going in was just hanging out with the kids, just hearing them out and hearing their stories. And there were times that we just played Frisbee together or we were playing soccer, but we have pictures of that, of just, the joy that filled their hearts when someone looked at them and just, hey, I want to throw to you. And they're like, oh my goodness, you are picking me for something. It's like just the joy that was coming out, kind of like what Doug was saying. And then we...
they'd never seen a Frisbee before.
No, they've never seen a Frisbee before. They thought it was a plate. And so I was just throwing it, and then they would throw it back, and they didn't know how to throw it back. So we were trying to teach them. And then at one of the orphanages, just the orphanage that we went to, we made bracelets together that would walk them through the whole biblical narrative from beginning to the end, that all the colors represented something, and so they were able to take something with them and wear it as they went about their day and remember that God was with them and that they were able to tell the story to their friends. And so that was a really cool opportunity to see them just like light up and learn something new and be a part of something that was, I think, greater for, the rest of their lives that they'll take. But there was one scenario or just event that happened in particular. I found myself in our van that we were just sitting in. Me and Mackenzie were just sitting there trying to escape the heat, and these kids just swarmed. Like, they just wanted to talk to us. They didn't want anything. They're just like, I just want to talk to you. What are you doing? Like, hey, can I just hang out with you? Can I take a picture of you? I was like, sure. And so we ended up taking pictures right outside the van, and there was a kid kind of on the outside as we took this picture. His name was Philemon, and I remembered it very distinctly because I was like the book in the Bible? He's like, yes. And I'm like, awesome, cool. We're going to get along just fine. And so we're just taking pictures, and as soon as I sat back in the van, he rushed to the front and wanted to sit right at the edge of the van and talk to me. And I was like, hey, man, what's going on? And he was just telling me all of this stuff. And I asked him, I was like, hey, if you could do anything, like if you could really just dream about anything you wanted to do, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do as you get older? And he told me, he's like, I want to grow up and be a preacher just like you. I was like, oh, man. And so, like, in that moment, it's like there's no words that I can say. There's no, like, things that I can do of, like, that's awesome. You should really chase that. You should really do that. And so in that moment, I asked him, is there anything I can pray for you about? Is there anything that you need, anything that I can do to help you in your life as you go forward and as you walk? This kid was an orphan. This kid has lost his parents. I saw the room that he slept in. It was a dirt floor with cement walls and open windows. And, like, this is, I wrote it down. There'll be a picture of the paper, but... I have this paper, and it convicted me in the moment. I lost it at 8 a.m., but I'll try to be fine. But he asked for 4 things that this little 16-year-old kid being asked, what do you want to pray for? And he asked for wisdom given by God, understanding to know who God is, leadership to lead people to God, and a spirit to trust in him and not anybody else. That this kid spoke, I believe, from the same spirit David had, of this was a kid after God's own heart. That he was so in love and wanting to know who Jesus was, that the external things that he was dealing with didn't matter. That he didn't ask for food, he didn't ask for water, he didn't ask for his parents, he didn't ask for anything in like a tangible thing that he could take with him. The only thing he wanted was, I want to be closer to God. My central point in my life and my focus in life is to get closer to God. That's all I want. Everything else is secondary because this is the only issue I have in my life. I want to know who God is. And so that still convicts me today. I have the paper. I continue to pray over it. And so if you want to pray for Philemon Siraki, like, please, and I hope he's doing well. And if I have the opportunity, I'm going to adopt him, and he's going to be over here soon. So that's just where we're at. But just, going into the Christmas season of what can I get? It's like, I want to be closer to God. That's what I want in this life.
Joyce, I know a special trip for you because your mom and dad have gone so many times, but it's your first time to go.
Yeah, I have to say this was definitely a bucket list item for me because of all the stories I've heard over the years since I was a baby growing up of my parents being on these trips and then actually getting to experience it myself. It was definitely a bucket list item. But one thing that moved me was the girl that Tori was talking about that had the real bad infection. Her mother was with her, and she also had a 3-week-old baby. And during the process of them trying to remove this tooth or do whatever treatment they were doing, I looked over and I saw the mother crying. And from one mother to another, you know how that feels when you see your child going through something like that. So I was in charge of doing the sanitation for the dental equipment. And so while it was all cooking and sanitizing, I just walked over and put my hand on her shoulder. There was a language barrier, but she knew and she felt that comfort. And it was just a really moving experience for me to be able to do that for another person. The other thing that was pretty funny to me was at one of the locations we were at, we were inside and there were windows, and there were kids that would just gather around the windows and because they just wanted to watch what was going on. And so I had taken one of the exam gloves that we used when the dentists and stuff were using, and I blew it up like a balloon and tied it off, and I handed it out the window to these little boys, and you would have thought I handed them $1 million. They were, smiles, and they were, so then I thought, well, I'll do another one. Well, the next thing I know, when I turn around, there's like a slew of kids wanting these little balloons. So I told the group, I said, we're going to have to take balloons next time because we can do that. But it was a very meaningful trip to me, again, to be able to experience it with my dad and all that.
Thank you. I'll go to me, then we'll kind of wrap up with you in just a moment. I think two of the things that impacted me the most, one is I get in a car and I drive my kids to the doctor, or I drive my wife to the doctor, or she drives me. The lady in the next picture there, her daughter had carried her 12 miles, from what I understand, on her back. Hopefully that picture will come up. There it is. She had one leg. She was blind from cataracts. That was where you might have seen the video where we said, how much is it to fix the cataract? Because when they told her, she said, well, we can't get there. We don't have the means. And like Stephanie said, it was like $25,000 of their whatever. And so we did $25,000. It was like $15.53. And it was like, how many do we have? We have like 75 of those. Well, consider them done. Consider them done. All because you had given. We didn't have to wonder whether we had enough money to pay for something. It was just something like that. And I'll kind of go to extremes here. And then this last little girl, it was just another sad case. That is skin cancer growing on her. You can see her skin is stuck to her little shirt on the top of there. The one doctor that I talked to, I can't think of their name, Mackenzie. Dr. Nicholas looked, and he just came, and they put it back down. They made her as comfortable as they could. There were worms inside the infection, and they said she's probably got a couple of weeks, maybe 3 left. And we just prayed with the mom that had brought that. And again, the disparity that if she were here, it would never have gotten there. At the same time, in each of them, and I may tell one of their funny stories at another later, there were some funny things that happened along the way too. I think bathroom things. The very first bathroom we had, it only came up waist high. And if you're a guy, and I remember one day trying to hold it, and then one day I think, I can't hold it anymore, I'm going to go. And I look around, and the whole village is looking at you, and they can only see you from here up. But like I thought I can hold it longer. I sat back down. Oh, there's no way to get through here. Another one happened kind of with, I don't know if I should tell this. Anyway, I'll tell it. Y'all tell me if I shouldn't tell it next time, and I won't. So a lady had stood in a line so long, and then I'm taking her to Mackenzie, and so I'm looking at Mackenzie trying to make eye contact. I said, I'm bringing this lady to you. She doesn't speak English, and like the interpreters, Doug is already, the interpreter is with Doug. So I'm walking over there, and she sees I'm about to get her to another line that she's going to have to be in. And so she just, I guess she thinks I can do something. She pulls out her top, let me just say that. And right as she does, like I thought, oh my heavens. And I turned around and I looked at, I said to Mackenzie, does she have out what I think she does? And Mackenzie says, yep, she does. I went, tell her to put it up. Tell her to put it up. Mackenzie goes, Tom, this is not sexual for her. I said, me either, Mackenzie, but I don't know if y'all tell me about it. There were funny things that happened with all of us. I think from going down the road, our windows down because there's no air in these vehicles we're in, and you hear people every single day yelling, Ratiki, 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 Ratiki. And finally we asked, what are they yelling? And I think it was Mackenzie again, had Pascal there with her. Pascal said, they're yelling, white people, white people, white people. And then Mackenzie went to Pascal and said something, showed him where to go amongst us. And he goes, "You're going to have to take me. All you white people look the same to me." And so it was just a strange series of stuff that could only happen so many miles away from here. There were the top moments. There were the moments when, oh my heavens, if you had one more bag of food, if you had one more minute of daylight, and we even make our security guards upset with us sometimes because we would fight to stay to the very end. They didn't want us out at dark in that area, and we would fight to stay as long as we could. But Lee, hey, wrap us up.
Just a couple of quick things. I am so proud of this crew. They went through stuff that I'm sure was a surprise, but it turned out to be a blessing. We learned a lot, and so the next trip is going to be a whole lot more organized than this one was. But I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you. NorthField, your giving made this possible, and I'm going to tell you what, you changed hundreds and hundreds of lives. You did that. Thank you, and back to Tom.
And in this remote, often forgotten region of the world, we serve people from 4 villages who were living out in the fields when suddenly from Gallatin, Tennessee, these different looking people appeared to them and the glory of the Lord was seen through them. And many of the people, especially the kids, were terrified. And these different looking people said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." I hope that you see that you made Christmas come early to a whole lot of people around the world. I love you. We love you. Merry Christmas. We'll see you next week.